Welcome to DJNTV and Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe. Now introducing the one and only Ben Stowe.
Yeah, baby! Yeah. So you're looking at the calendar and you're thinking, it's Tuesday. There's important things that happen on Tuesdays. Let's refresh your memory of what those could be. It could be tacos. It could be nothing else but Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe. Really, let's just not even go with the other things. It's just Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe. With the one and only Ben Stowe.
I kind of like tacos.
That's true. Tacos are good. I saw a restaurant had this dish of taco things, and it's like, wow, there's only about 16 of them short of what there should be because there's like 16 on the platter.
I need to update my wife's calendar. She just texted me and said dinner's ready. I wonder if it's tacos.
Yeah, maybe delivery. Is there delivery in this house? We gotta check that out. So Ben, tonight I wanted to dig into the process of speaker, the way the manufacturers build these things that we use as our main tools each and every weekend. Because, you know, we both have had the luxury, and you've probably been to multiple places where they manufacture. And I got to tour Electro Voice, the facility there. And of course, I know a little bit about the construction world and have taken speakers apart and done different things. But I think for a lot of DJs out there, they probably haven't, they don't think too terribly much of what all goes into that. And I really kind of wanted to just kind of pick your brain a little bit and walk through some of the things that are behind the scenes that make this voodoo sound thing happen for us each and every weekend. So first off, one of the areas I wanted to kind of start with is there's different types of components that our speakers are made of, and I'm just talking specifically the shell now. There's plastics and there's wood out there and different things. Let's kind of start there with some of that, and then we'll move into the difference, some of the things with the cones. But advantages, disadvantages. Why don't they just do one type of cabinet and call it good when it comes to materials that's made out of?
Well, cost, I think, first and foremost. I think that, there's a lot to be said about that. There's different ways that cabinets are built and, different processes, and even within, the various types of composites or plastics, and then also within the various types of wood. And in fact, I swiped this off the interwebs, but I did put their logo in here for a nice little plug. So in case you're looking for kitchen cabinets,
nice.
Let's see. It is from PA Kitchen. They just had this handy picture on. I just did a quick search. It's funny because I live in the middle of, I'm wearing a lumberjack shirt, so I guess you know where I live. But anyway, you would think it wouldn't be hard for me to find pictures of wood, but I went to the internet. And here we can see three different types of wood that might be used in making loudspeakers. And obviously, everybody's heard the expression Baltic birch and birch plywood, that sort of thing. Those are going to be your typically your better loudspeakers, right? And then we've got things like MDF and particle board and oriented strand board and those kinds of things. So even within, wood, not all wood is created equal. And even within, plywood or birch, we could take, for example, our friends at Electro Voice, and you sort of, I think you alluded or mentioned, their engineering facility.
Which is, I've gotten the chance to go tour and look at some of the different things there. So
yeah, and it's world class, and it's it's one of the few in the United States, which is really cool. And of course for us, it's very close to us geographically. But I've been to several others too, and it's really neat to see how different companies have a different approach, to see how lucky Evie is to have some of the tools and resources they do, which clearly manifests itself in some of the products. But even within their line, EKX is 15 millimeter birch and ETX is 18 millimeter birch. So, even if we just said wood versus plastic, that's not really telling the whole story, But anyway, weight and cost are probably the two principal things for why you would pick, composite versus wood.
So you were talking about the wood, and let's kind of go there, because this is an area in which I've spent a lot of time, because you showed the different some of the different plywoods or different types of manufactured wood, and that's what the plywood falls into that. One of the things that I think some DJs have who want to build their own speakers, just a second, I got to share a link. Is just in that you mentioned the birch plywood, but there are different plywoods out there. Some are having 12 thicknesses, where it's 12 very super thin layers. For a lot of you who've done some construction and done some things around the house, you might be looking at a 3 or a 5 layer plywood. What they're using for speaker cabinets is something at a higher level than even most of our furniture would even have.
Yeah, it's really premium stuff. Again, I mean that depends, right? The brand and the product and the quality, but certainly when you get up into these upper end loudspeakers, I mean every component is better. And they Alan and our viewer and my friend Alan is texting me because he knows I get the texts during the show, and I'm not going to read his comments on the air. So sorry,
Yeah,
Alan. It's
that
a
could be
family show,
that could be a
but
loaded thing there, but yeah.
he just. I digress. He does it because he knows it'll take me off my game and get. But the thing is, I don't really have a game, so I mean, I'm just struggling. I do feel better this week. You can tell I still got a little bit of that cold, but anyway. Yeah, all of these components, and in fact, that's one of the things you'll note when we go at EV, is everything starts in the virtual realm where they're using computers now to simulate things, and instead of build and test, they can leapfrog a lot of that by simulating things, and then they can build and test. But they've gone through what would have taken a lot of time and material, and they can do that in the computer, and then they can build those models and do the tests and make refinements. And of course, it still takes many years to develop a good loudspeaker. But that's where they're going to be very careful about transducer design, the actual driver itself. And of course, they do design their own transducers. So, they're designing the actual speaker that goes in the box, and then you kind of design a box around that. And then you get into, software, the DSP, those kinds of things. And I did snipe some pictures of some of the EV engineering stuff. They have a great video, by the way, but everybody should just keep watching this one for now. So
before we jump into a lot of the components and getting into the digital side of it, just from a perspective of the different sound quality you get from a wood to a plastic cabinet, because this is something that DJs have talked about, and some DJs have stated that there's no difference, so you can get a great similar sound from one to the other. From my experience, that hasn't been the case, but that might be because I wasn't, playing with an equivalent level of speaker or something. Typically, what do you find that say a quality wood box over a quality composite box, is there going to have a sound difference in that?
I think so. I still do. And I think that it's getting harder and harder. There's certainly some really good composite boxes out there, and there's some really crummy ones, and there's some really crummy wood boxes too. But the word that everybody seems to use with wood, and I agree with it, is warmth. It just has a body to it. It just feels like it's got kind of a tone and a quality that you just don't seem to hear in the plastic realm, I guess, but there's so many other factors that can't be overlooked, again, overall design, driver size, horn size, acoustic alignment, all the kinds of things that just go into building a really good speaker. So I guess my point is we can't just simply say, well, it's wood, therefore it's better,
Yeah, there's definitely. So let's work our way to the front of the speaker. Let's talk about the woofer, or the larger cone that traditional has, either if it's a 2 or 3, but it would be the bigger, whether it's 12, 15 inch. What are some of the traits of that compared to, because a lot of people are like, oh, it's just like the subwoofer, the cone that's in my sub, which I don't think that's the case.
Well, we did a great show, which should be, if you can, I always do this to you, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, we did a show, go find the link. But where we talked about driver responses, and I think it was actually a show on subwoofers. Maybe it was on drivers. But we talked about a 12 that's designed for a sub versus a 12 that's designed to go on a high frequency. And, we're talking about the certain qualities that we want of that, right? Do we want to, higher X max, X slim? We want, really move some air, low frequencies. Do we want that to be voiced like a good mid? And clearly there's a design difference between a 12 that's designed as a low mid and a 12 that's designed as a subwoofer, for example. And then, looking at kind of like drivers within a class, typically the bigger driver is louder. So, a 12 is louder than an 8 with the same power, and a 15 is louder than a 12, that sort of thing. But we also, it's just such a really fun but detailed and slippery topic, you know. We also get into voicing, right?
Hmm.
You know, I mean, so is a 15 always better? Well, not always. I mean, sometimes I really like the voicing of a 12 if you have an 18 sub, for example, you know. Well, what if you got a 12-inch sub? Well, you could do a 12 over a 12, but I think an 8 over a 12, you know. I mean, we can really spend a lot of time talking about the pros and cons of how each integral part of a system is designed, but I think the key word there is system, you know?
And then I think one of the things that you've talked about in other shows also is the idea that everyone's going to hear something a little bit differently, and what's appealing to your ear may not be appealing as appealing to my ear type of a situation, and that's really a
Without a
big
doubt.
yeah.
Without a doubt. Yep. There's going to be subjectivity, and I've always, I can't say always because it was only 10 years ago we did this, but we did you may have actually been there, come to think of it, because it was in Minnesota. It was at one of the MAP DJ meetings, so I guess that does age me a little bit. But
Hmm.
we did a speaker shootout of sorts, right? And we did a blind test, and then we did a test without the, you know, where people could see the speakers. And it was fascinating to me that people voted differently based on what they saw.
Hmm.
You know, so I think we do listen with our eyes too, and we have our predisposed biases. And it was really interesting to see how people voted differently when they couldn't see the logo. So I think that's part of it for sure. But even if not, not everybody voted the same. There were clearly trends. You know, there was clearly a majority winner, but not everybody. It wasn't like everybody said that speaker is better. There is absolutely going to be some subjectivity. I think there's a lot of things that go in that preference. You know, also your own personal hearing response. I think that's probably a really interesting topic. It would be cool to sit down with like an audiologist or something and say, "What do you think that is?"
Hmm.
You know? And we probably have to get a psychologist in there too. You know.
Very possible, yeah, because this could move way beyond music and taste that way.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about things like, you know, the how the human eye is more sensitive to green light, and that's the sun's light content has a higher spectral content of green, and similarly, why, you know, our hearing tends to be kind of peaked around the areas of voice communication, and babies' cries tend to hit right in that hot zone where it's really obnoxious.
It comes right,
You
yeah, it
know,
cuts through.
we really, really don't like it, but there's sort of a reason for that.
Hmm.
You know, we need to hear that baby. It's, you know, to perpetuate our species, a baby can't do much to help themselves. So we need to be, you know, moved by that cry to where we would take action, you know? So now if you're on an airplane, you don't think much
Yeah,
about
yeah,
evolution.
you're not too impressed by that fact on the airplane, not so much.
Right.
So let's move up to the high frequency driver that's typically in the box, whether it's a 2 or 3-way. Not really, but I just want to look at the little driver at the very top that's handling those very high frequencies. There's a couple of different drivers that are utilized in that one. Let's talk about those for a second.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I grabbed a few examples. Excuse me. Still got that cough. Sorry,
Yeah.
viewers. You know, I grabbed a few examples of some, you know, speaker parts I had laying around, and one thing I didn't grab was any high frequency drivers. But you know, if we think about frequency and wavelength, the lower frequencies are longer wavelengths. We need to move more air. That's why we see, you know, cone type woofers that move more. The movements for high frequencies tend to be very, very, very tiny, and so are the wavelengths. So, you know, we have things like these, you know, titanium domes, you know, compression drivers, things like that. And of course, there's different types. There's soft dome tweeters, and mostly what we see in pro audio, you know, compression drivers, that sort of thing. And then, of course, we attach them to some type of device that controls the sound coverage, whether it be a horn or I did grab my waveguide. Any chance I get to put this in a show, you know,
Nice.
I do.
Yeah.
So, you know, a high frequency would bolt on here, and there'd be two halves, and this, you know, waveguide is going to help steer that lower energy, that high frequency sound, because it's more easily blocked or diverted or absorbed.
Nice. So yeah, that's a feature that are on some. That particular waveguide was off one of your touring pieces.
It's actually the generation before what I use now.
Hmm.
The one I use now uses a series of pins inside. It kind of looks like a Plinko game,
Oh wow.
but they're again, this is just science at work, you know, and all the things that we've seen in those engineering rooms where they figured out that somehow that was better. than these aluminum pathways. This is called a Hydra, I think, is what the name they called that. But anyway, the new one, the, you know, pin gradient, I don't know. Anyway, that's so no, it's not off the series I'm using now. They've upgraded. So
I have like a Plinko. That's interesting. I haven't seen one of those
it's
yet.
really what it looks like.
Yeah.
You know what? I got to get one. I should, for the once or twice a decade we do a speaker engineering show. I think that piece.
I
should get one.
I think
Yeah.
that piece has been on our show at least a half a dozen times, if not more.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, it's been used a few times in there. So, so let's slide over to the DSP side of things. That the components can vary, of course, as we've talked about, and we can get back to the quality of the components as we go. But the last element really is the DSP, the digital signal processing, and that can vary. So let's kind of dig into that one.
I'm going to pull up some slides here too, and I think, I'm just gonna run through a few actually, if that's all right.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Because I think they kind of tell the story a little bit. So this is really hard to see what's going on here, but what we can see, that's a loudspeaker cone on the left. The big black oval, is I don't know how it looks in perspective to a viewer, but you can see in the middle there's a red dot, and that's a laser beam that's pointing at that. And what's happening is as they produce sound in this driver, the laser will map and monitor the movement of the surface of that speaker.
Okay.
And it's going to give very precise information about what's happening with the materials. So just as we talked about the box, there's different material types, different glue types, different pieces that are used to build a loudspeaker. I think my camera window is still up here, but of course I got my little cutaway. So there's all these different things that go in there, and this laser is going to help measure what happens when that speaker does its job. So then the engineers can make adjustments to that. Excuse me. And then that data, can be used to further develop the box. And here we see this polar arm inside the anechoic chamber at Electrovoice. I think this chamber is anechoic down to at least 50 hertz. Quite a ways. Those wedges are about 4 feet deep, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, yep.
And so this polar arm is going to take measurements and then move the speaker precisely, take another measurement, move the speaker precisely. And this is something that actually you can't just buy off the shelf. Evie actually designed and built this robot. And again, I've toured a lot of different loudspeaker engineering facilities, and it's always interesting to see how other people do that. Especially when you don't have EV money, because they do have a lot of cool toys that other manufacturers just don't.
Right.
They just don't have the tools because these are crazy expensive. But anyway, here's a little closer view of that. And so then you could take that information and use it to get into the software side. And here we can see this FIR filters, particularly up here in the high frequency. We can see that real brick wall crossover point. But we can also see down here at the bottom, if you can see it, where there's delays and things, compensating for some of the maybe shifts in phase in the box, whatever they be from. I'm so sorry about the coughing, viewers. I do apologize. Still just trying to get over whatever. Better not say pandemic. That's kind of not a good word.
Yeah, it's probably not. It's like, yeah.
No, it's just a cold. But anyway, it's just the last hanging on parts of the cold. And here we can see how that would be really advantageous. So this is a polar balloon measuring an XLC DVX at 630 hertz. And on the left side, you can see if that was using a conventional crossover network. And then on the right, when we look at like these brick wall crossover networks, and smoothing that out, what we get, is a far more accurate and smooth and linear response from that speaker, So anyway, so that's how that software can be so important, is you can have all these things that we've done all along. We've designed the transducer, then we built a box around it, then we measured and tuned and modified the box, and everything is as good as it can be made And then now we put in these incredibly powerful and accurate, filters, FIR and that sort of thing. And the end result we get is just really phenomenal. And if you take a, kind of an entry level box today and take it back to the 80s, it's gonna sound better than some of the premium boxes.
Yeah.
It's just incredible what we get today. And there was also a point I was going to make there, and I guess I'm sorry I forgot it. But anyway, just to say that, I'm sorry. Yeah, so we were doing a speaker shootout, and a guy had built his own speakers, and he wanted to see how they did. And it was really an awesome conversation. I really enjoyed it because, obviously he's got a really incredible passion for this, and I really enjoyed talking to him. But he was really blown away at the measurements when he measured his box. Without these things and without these resources, without these tools, he was like, wow. It's kind of like taking your backyard, stock car and competing against a Formula One car.
Sure.
And you go, wow, I had no idea you guys could do all that, right? And what was cool about it is he took his lumps pretty well. I think he actually was inspired by it. I think he wants to continue to grow and improve. But it was just, you couldn't have asked for a better example of how it matters, right? That it's just, we don't just cut a hole in a plywood box and stick a speaker in it and call it a day. That just doesn't cut it in 2024,
But with that being said, and because there's so many speakers out there from so many different manufacturers and such, there are some out there, and we're not going to dig into it, but there do exist some where they're basically making a box, sticking components on, and here you go.
There's tons and tons of stuff you can buy from China, and there's, and I don't know what those guys are doing over there, whatever, there are companies that are making very simplistic boxes and they meet a price point. Probably, the first speakers I owned, I doubt a lot of engineering went into those, I think they were, $100 a piece or something. I don't know, but,
and I
or
think,
whatever 1990s money that was, but
yeah, that'd be $1,000 these days. But you used the phrase that a price point, and I think that was one of the big things that talking to a couple of people in that speaker world is that there's different there at 4 different price points that they can hit, and there's the one at this price point is not going to give you the same as the one at this price point. And it's that what is it, a series of compromises? Is that how that phraseology?
Yeah, that's what I say. Engineering is a series of compromises.
Yeah,
I'm not sure I coined the phrase, but I love that saying because it's true. Engineering is a series of compromises, right? I remember my friend Stu Schatz, who was a loudspeaker engineer for years and years and years, saying that the perfect line array is one that is infinitely long and infinitely small all at the same time.
And good luck finding that.
Right. It doesn't exist. At some point, the theoretical, and these discussions happen within the walls of these loudspeaker manufacturers, and a lot of that cost is the R&D cost too, right? You can make a cheaper speaker by just skipping all that stuff. You saved a lot of cost by having engineers and having anechoic chambers and having lasers and having all these things, and of course you end up with an inferior product. But there's your price point. But even within the walls of a place like Electro Voice or RCF or any of these quality loudspeaker manufacturers, there's arguments. I think that's a fair word to say, right?
Sure.
Because everybody's got their area they need to defend, right? And that's why it works. Engineering could probably build as close to perfect loudspeaker as possible, and marketing says we can't market that. The thing is, the size of a bus, and sales says we can't sell that. It costs more than a bus, So there's those compromises, right? Build us the best loudspeaker you can, make it weigh nothing, make it small and easy to carry, and make it fit this price point. And you can just really sort of imagine the engineers just, but that doesn't mean the engineers are right either. And I'm probably most closely aligned with the engineers in my heart. But if you can't sell it and you can't carry it and you can't afford it, it doesn't matter how good it is either, right? So you have to have this tug of war, right? Like we're trying to make a speaker that addresses this market and this need, and it needs to be the best it possibly can for this amount of money. And there's that, you know.
And I think you're really describing the whole world of the little mini array systems that we're so happy
100%.
with. It's, you know, that you know, everyone is, you know, why didn't they come out with this type of a thing or that type of a thing? I think it's really one of those situations. They're looking at the market, they're looking at the potential audience for it, and saying that this would be covering the most at this point in time in the game.
Well, absolutely. You know, and again, sorry, DJs, I love you, but you're not the only group that buys loudspeakers. So, you know, they're looking at the whole pie, right? Like who's going to buy these on the macro picture, right? You know, but I think you hit the nail on the head there. You know, people have said, well, I want something like the Evolve 50, but bigger. And I say, well, what about the Evox 12 or the Maui 44? No, it's too big or it's too expensive. I'm like, okay.
Yep.
So you know that if EV comes out with a bigger Evolve, it's going to be bigger and it's going to be more expensive. You know, it's going to weigh what those things do and it's going to cost what those things do. And I mean, that's just sort of the unfortunate. I wish there was a way to just make magic. And I think we have, actually. You know what? I think we have made magic, because the box that this waveguide was in weighed about 40% more than the speaker that replaced it that I use now. And the speakers I use now sound better and they're louder. So, I mean, I think we have made some of that magic, but it just isn't going to happen in like a year, you know. So, but I think you're right, 100%.
Yeah, and I think that's the part of the thing that we kind of forget, and why I really wanted to do tonight's show, is that we look at it and say, well, let's take the best of this one and the best of this one and the best of this one, and then all of a sudden we've got this speaker that is, you know, it's the perfect speaker, but, you know, first off, is it even possible to engineer it with the best of all these speakers? And then secondly, is what does the price point become? Is this now, we go from a $2,000 speaker to a $5,000 speaker? And if so, who's going to buy that $5,000 speaker?
Yeah, let's say, this is purely hypothetical, by the way. I just want to make this very clear. This is hypothetical. But let's say Evie said, hey, we have a replacement for the Evolve 50. It's the same size, but it does what a Maui 44 does, but it's $10,000. You know, nobody would buy it. I mean, maybe a couple, right? You know, there's been speakers like that out there in the past, super high-end niche stuff.
Yes.
You know, and that's what it is. So I think it's like, you know, if you're a mass market speaker manufacturer like Electro Voice, RCF, JBL, DB Tech, QSC, whatever, if your intent is to sell hundreds of thousands of these, that has to play into that engineering discussion, right? You know, because again, you could have a niche project and say, hey, we got these things. I mean, I can tell you, you know, I mean, even within like Adam Hall, I didn't mean to skip them. Sorry, LD Systems. I mean, I guess I did mention the Maui, but they have their P900, which was designed in partnership with Porsche. And it weighs about what a Porsche does, and it costs almost what a Porsche does. And, you know,
it's expensive, yeah.
We don't sell very many. I mean, you know, on a percentage basis, their other speakers outsell that significantly. So, you know, it's just, anyway, engineering is a series of compromises. It's a great way to say it.
Very true. We've got a good question here from Philip, and we got a lot of folks watching tonight, so thank you for being with us. But Philip had a question about who's the biggest market segment when it comes to portable speakers. Who do you imagine is buying the most?
Portable speakers?
Yeah.
I would say, you know, musicians are a significant part of that marketplace. A lot of them are also crossover for small install. And once you get into, you know, actual pro install, that's a whole different realm, of course. You know, it's a whole different world, you know. DJs are a significant buyer, but I think that's where, you know, a lot of, I'll pick on our friends at Evie because I do really like Evie, but, you know, when they came out with the Evolve 30, DJs said, you know, what's this? You know, like, and of course it's been great for ceremonies and a lot of DJs love it, but
Yep, love
DJs were like, why is there a guitar player in the ad? Well, either because EV's morons and they didn't know what they were doing, or they
Or
figured out that, yeah, or their marketing team of this, $2 billion division decided that, that was who the market was. So
I like to look at it from the standpoint is that DJs will see a guitar player but they'll look at the speaker and say, "Ooh, if it works for a guitar player, I can use it." A
right.
guitar player would see a DJ with the speaker and be like, "Oh yeah, I don't know. It's a DJ speaker. I don't want to deal with it."
Might be something like that too, but I think,
Yeah,
can't we all be friends, right? A lot of DJs are musicians, I mean,
there's quite a few, but
I'm a failed musician, I think to call me a musician is insulting to musicians everywhere, but
so of course, the different lines, of course, or different speaker companies have different lines. Pretty much that's across the board for the main manufacturers and such. How important do you think it is in this day and age to have such a diversity in their line from a more of a entry level type to a more high end, or have the days of basically a company puts out one speaker and this is our, do they have to be that diverse nowadays?
I think it depends on the company. I think it depends on how serious you are about addressing a market. I mean, somebody said on a forum something like, EV hardly released anything new this year. And I said, they released almost 100 new products, just only one of them was for you, So I think it depends on how, what your line is, right? I mean, let's not forget that, EV speakers are hanging in the Dallas Cowboys Stadium, right? And they're in Allianz Arena. And same with, RCF, they've got a whole line of stuff that isn't necessarily on the radar, right? So they have a lot of SKUs. RCF has more powered speakers than EV by a good margin, actually. And then you look at other companies and you're like, wow, they really only have kind of one powered line, So I guess it comes down to your business plan, your business model, your priorities and how you're going to address the market. It wouldn't be for me to say, how important it is. I think that's for that company to say how important it is.
So when you have a customer is calling saying, "Hey Ben, I want to look at speakers, or I'm looking for some new speakers," how does the having of multiple lines within a company, and again, we're most familiar with Electro Voice because we talk about those a lot, but
Yeah.
is that a benefit for you as a salesperson to be able to help them?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I'm not a salesperson. Let's just
Well,
be. Let's.
As a person,
I help. Yes,
a helper,
I do. I do make sales, and I do help people buy things. But I really, first of all, I'm not paid as a salesperson. But second of all, I don't think of myself as a salesperson. I think of myself as an engineer and someone who is simply finding solutions to challenges. So, if there's any salespeople watching, I'm sorry if my response offended you. It's not at all. I don't think of myself as a salesperson, and I don't wake up every day thinking I got to sell something. I wake up thinking about the problems that I'm going to solve. But that being the case, it's very helpful to have a lot of tools in the toolkit. And the fact is, there's a lot of great speakers out there, and I've got a whole line of them to choose from, not just Electro Voice, not just RCF, not just DB Tech, not just EAW and LD Systems and JBL and QSC and Yamaha. And, we carry almost 300,000 products. So that gives me a lot of now. And thank you, Alan. He says, he just texted. He said, I agree. You're not a salesperson. You're a problem solver first. I'll read that text on the air.
There you go. There's one. He's got his one in the air.
There you go. You got your text on the air. You happy now? But thank you for the kind words, Alan. I think that, I don't have any motivation. I do have biases. I'll admit every person does. I have biases that are based on how helpful that company is going to be if there's a problem, what their experience has been or what their track record has been with products. I mean, I certainly have biases, and in some ways I feel obligated to bring those forward in the conversation because I think that's why people are asking me. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I always try to walk that back a little bit and say, there's a lot of good choices out there, really. And the truth is, like, I don't get a toaster oven if I sell more of this or more of that. I don't get a commission or a spiff. I mean, sometimes we get swag, right? I got EV shirts and RCF shirts and whatever, but those aren't enough to motivate me to push one speaker. Sorry, I mean, keep sending the swag. Don't get me wrong, but but I'm just saying, like, those things don't sway how I feel about a product's build and integrity and quality and performance, all those things are what sway me. How happy do I think the customer is going to be when they get this? Because, when all the talking is done and the speaker gets delivered, then the proof's in the pudding, right?
For sure.
I mean, you got the speaker in your hand. So
I think Ben, and I'm gonna, you can agree or whatever with this. I think from what I have seen, knowing you for years and being with you at DJ conventions and such, I think one of the parts of this whole part of being that helper that you really appreciate, and I think that hits home for you, is when you're at a show and someone comes up and says, hey, Ben sold me my sound system and it absolutely is perfect for me and it kicks butt. And it was a great, and thank you, Ben. And you've had that feedback at shows, and when people finally get to meet you face to face, and first off, they'll say, wow, you look taller than you are on, and then they'll go,
because your phone is small.
Exactly.
Anyway,
it's yeah.
I'm not a Smurf,
Yeah, tip your phone up a little bit and you'll be good. But that feedback, when you can get that genuine feedback, face-to-face feedback, where somebody's coming up and giving you a hug and thanking you for helping them solving the problem. That I think is more of a motivator for you, from my observations over the years, than making a sale or anything to that effect. That person's feedback is where you recharge your battery.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, I really do take it personal, and I think you're 100% right. I love that. It's as I'm now 30 years into the industry, I really couldn't tell you what I sold yesterday or last week or the year before or any of that, but I really do think about the relationships and the people.
Right.
And the more that I begin to contemplate my next act, be that retirement, whatever, and it's probably 20 years away, right? But you and I are in a part of our lives where we start to think about different things,
For sure.
I that's kind of the stuff I think about. I'm kind of like, who are the people I'm going to stay in touch with? Who are the people I'm going to continue to? Yes, Alan, you'll be on the list anyway. But
it's going to burn up your phone for a few seconds here.
But I mean, you're right. And so when things don't go well, I take that personal too. And I think you have to be willing to take the good with the bad, right? It's sort of like, DJs say, well, if somebody says we're awesome, we believe them. If they say we suck, we're like, that guy's a moron.
Yeah, they're an idiot. Yeah.
But I think you have to take both, and you have to hear both. If somebody says, hey, you missed on this. This didn't do what I wanted it to. It didn't work out well, whatever. I take that probably even more personal than the compliments,
Sure.
right? You really think about, well, how did I miss? What was the circumstance? What was the situation? Why didn't that work out? Did they not give me the information in a way that I understood it? Why didn't I seek clarification? Like, how can I avoid that, right? Because it's sure a lot better to get the hugs,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're right. I thank you for saying that, John. That's really nice, and I appreciate that observation. I really do. I really do value people's feedback, and it's not because I'm seeking affirmation or validation. I probably am, but I think it's really more about being sincere.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted that outcome to be happy.
Right.
I wanted them to rock it and have a good time, right? That I think is what drives it. It's sort of like that's the scoreboard, where you're like, all right, that one worked. Yeah, and I want to be undefeated.
Let's talk a little bit about mounting, whether it's a pole mount or flying speakers. Generally, depending upon the lines and different things, there's different ways in which people can put their speakers up. We'll call it for a generic way. Does that matter when it comes to sound quality and different things? And how does the mounting apparatus affect its performance?
Well, here again, it's all part of the equation, right? So now you got the speaker that has to weigh this and sound like this and cost this, and it also has to be mounted, or rigged or whatever, right? So that is always a factor, right? I remember a conversation with an engineer about a loudspeaker, and I said, it needs a handle over here. Oh, we can't put a handle over there. I said, well, how are you going to put it up on a pole? And I watched him try to do it, and it was pretty awkward. I'm like, see? but well, it's going to cost more and it's going to change and then the cubic spit in the box and it's not going to sound right. And I'm like, you still got to lift it. So those are all factors. And just yesterday, I de-rigged one of the more loudspeaker clusters I've ever done in my life. It was one that we replaced. We put up a new system, and part of the contract for this install was to take this system down. And I was really, really happy when it was all the way down slowly. In fact, the executive director of the arena said, "How long is this going to take?" And I said, "Well, it could take a couple hours, or it could take a couple seconds. I guess we'll see." And it was, so that's something you got to really take seriously too. And I have one more slide. And here again, engineering costs money, takes time, but that's really important, right? So this is a shot of you can see the Electro Voice logo. Destructive testing to see what how the various parts of this box will perform. When you say a box is flyable, and you can see they've got looks like an M10 fly, shoulder eye right there, fly bolt, but eye bolt. But you don't just do that willy nilly, and there's safety factors involved. If it breaks at 1,000 pounds, then it's rated for 1/8 of that or 1/10 of that, so it's rated at 100 pounds. Okay, But all those things have to become a part of that, right? Because they also add to the cost and the weight and change the acoustics of it. And if you have rigid rigging structures, that may change how the box performs acoustically, and then back to the test, right? So we've got to work around that now.
So kind of flashing back to when we were with the audio symposium down at Electro Voice last year. Am I remembering it correctly when they were talking about the process of building a speaker is that they do the design, as you were saying, and putting some prospects together and get an idea of what it can do in the digital realm. And did they say that they 3D print the first generation, in essence, what the box could look like, and then they can do some basic testing with a 3D print before they actually start to try to do prototypes?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this all starts in the computer purely, where they can build these virtual boxes. By this point now, they kind of know, how does 15 millimeter 12 ply Baltic birch, how does it respond to these various acoustic stimuli, right? So how does this composite respond, right? Oh, and that's something else too. A lot of not as many as should, but most of the leading loudspeaker companies also, will continuously monitor. You release a speaker, and of course engineering thinks they've done everything right, and you launch it and you're happy, but then what happens when it really gets in the field, right?
Yes.
Tech support monitor, hey, we're having a lot of failures. It looks like we're a lot of mechanical failures on this driver, or a lot of thermal failures on this driver, or whatever. Constantly feeds back into that design process. So the whole system just gets better and better and better and better. But to that end, yes, absolutely, they can create these virtual models before they even 3D print it, and then once they're like, we should see what happens here, then they can 3D print that. And they can use different materials for that, and do a lot of those tests. And that's why it was really cool where, I remember taking a group through Electro Voice's engineering facility group from the lighting symposium, and somebody said, hey, that looks just like this other speaker from China. Evie, I bet Evie just bought those from China. And I'm like, let me show you the model room where they actually built the model for the mold. And I said, we'll just take a bet on who copied who, because it was designed and 3D printed in this building. Back then I think it was actually wooden models they would build to build out the molds. But I'm like, yeah, now I'll tell you who copied who. So.
Yeah, the facility and showing the building was definitely neat. You mentioned testing, of course, and another room I think is very impressive with the testing side of it is the one where they basically put the speakers in there, turn them up to 11, and let them buck for days.
I love pointing that out because it's that room, the power test room, is right by the loading dock. So anytime I bring somebody new to the loading dock there, I'll always point out that little spout on the side of the building with the cover on it. And so you know what that's for? And of course you move the cover and all of a sudden sound comes out and you're like, wow, it's loud in there. And that's going through like 2 walls.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, no, what's that for? And I said, that's a water drain. In case something in that room bursts into flames, they can, sprinkle it to, and there are burn marks all over the floor and burn marks all over the wall. I mean, they're not playing around, they test things. And now, of course, again, years and years of data, they've got this content that they know is going to be very, very hard on a loudspeaker. And they do turn it up to 11 and they really, really, I mean, yeah, I'm trying to think of a way to illustrate this to somebody who's just not been in there.
Well, the easiest way is that there's 2 doors to get into that room. And when you're outside the first door, you can hit, is there something going on? And you open that first door and it hits you. And there's still one more door, like 4 feet farther, 4 or 5 feet farther in, that is still a soundproof door that's yet to be opened.
Yeah, and you really can't go in there. It's almost unsafe for humans to go in there.
Yeah.
That's how I actually do have a picture from inside that room.
Oh, we didn't get to see that because it was,
it's not a good picture because most of the stuff that's in there, they don't let you really see. I actually put this picture because you could see the difference between like a cast frame woofer and a stamped steel woofer. That's kind of my thinking. But yeah, basically this is, now they're doing this on a component level, right? They put these drivers in there outside of boxes and they're just going to burn these up, to see what caused failure. As my friend Ethan Wetzel says, he says there's 2 reasons a loudspeaker fails, help I'm on fire and help I can't move, so, or help I move too much, whether it's a mechanical failure or a thermal failure. But again, they just constantly continue to inform the process and improve it. And any of your really good loudspeaker companies do. And as we said, Evie's lucky. They do have a lot of, I don't want to say toys, but tools that other companies just don't have the money to buy. But everybody's kind of found their way. There's another company, I'm not going to say who, because I don't, some of my mom said, if you can't say anything nice, right? But, where they didn't have an acoustic anechoic chamber. My brain is struggling today. I'm so sorry, but they didn't have an anechoic chamber. So they would they had this long arm that stuck out of their building on the 2nd floor. And they would run speakers out there, kind of like the old, hay lift, and then they would take gated responses off that speaker in their neighbor. I'm sure they were very popular with the neighbors, but they couldn't afford an acoustic chamber. So anechoic chamber, my goodness, that's the 3rd time I've said acoustic chamber. Anechoic, no echoes. Anyways, so you could just sort of think, well, what else can you do? Well, get it in as much free air as you can, and let's try that.
And it's out the 2nd floor window on a clothesline.
It was really pretty wild. I mean, I remember being in this place and I thought, and and I was in another US loudspeaker manufacturing engineering company that has basically a room with like mattresses on the walls. It's really kind of low tech. I'm like, I'm kind of like, it's not an anechoic chamber, but there, I said it right that time.
You did.
Finally. But those things, to build that anechoic chamber now would be, I don't know, $5 million probably.
Yeah. Somebody had mentioned, because there was 2 of them in Minnesota, and they were talking about the other one the other day on the news, and the price of that was huge into that 7 digits. It's like, really?
And you got to sell a lot of speakers to pay for that, right? So, if you can get by with not quite as good as speakers and you can just stick mattresses on the wall, well, go for it. Again, it's really hard. I mean, they're giving me the tour, and having been in the anechoic chamber and seeing some of the other facilities, I was trying really hard to, I'm like, oh yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Bless your heart there, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, and I like the people there too. They're good people, and it was anyway.
And I think that's one of the things that when a person's looking at the different brands and different manufacturers, that there are going to be differences because of whether it's the components used, the testing and tuning that they're able to do with whatever their situation is. And it really comes down to that there's just no way to be able to go and look on specs or look at and say that this one's better than that one in this day and age. I just don't think that exists anymore. It's now becomes those speaker shootouts that you guys have been doing at different locations. They become very valuable.
And there's so much to be said for that. The acoustics of the room, the quality of the music content, the type of music. I saw a comment where somebody said, well, I heard the demo at Midwest DJ, and then I went into the showroom and heard the same speaker, and it sounded way different. Yeah, I get it, right? Different room, different acoustics, different program material, compressed file, who knows, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's always a thing, right? And then sound, as you said, is subjective too. And I've got my opinions, no doubt, but far be it from me to tell somebody they're wrong if they're like, oh, I got the speaker and I love it. I'm like, that's all that matters.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Good for you. Because again, I don't care. I mean, I do care. I care about their happiness, but I don't care which speaker makes them happy. Is my
exactly
point, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of great tools out there. Way more than when I first started DJing, I have to say. I mean, there might have been more speaker companies, but at that time, there just wasn't the ability to get your hands on. And
the world's gotten smaller.
Very much.
Yeah,
so.
the world's gotten smaller. We have, a lot of, several Italian loudspeaker manufacturers now have a significant presence in the U.S. and they didn't years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the world has definitely gotten smaller. The internet has shrunk people's access to products. But I remember walking through NAMM 10 years ago and just sort of commenting as I was walking to my next meeting, commenting to a friend of mine who's a rep in the industry. And I said, is there enough business for all these speaker companies? And he said, no. So, sooner or later, there's going to be winners and losers, just like there always is, just like automotive, and these things tend to cycle. We're kind of in a new cycle there. There's a lot of new electric car makers, right? And I don't know. That's all over my head. I'm just a sound guy,
Yeah, we're just doing the DJ talk tonight. Ben, we're going to wrap things up, my friend. Thank you much for your insight and knowledge on that world of speaker manufacturers. If you guys have got some questions, if you're looking to upgrade or do anything like that, the link for the NLFX Pro website is down in the description of this video. You can go out there and check that out and get the phone number. Give the crew up there a call. Kyle or someone up there will be able to kind of walk you through. If you get lucky and Ben is actually in the office, because he's always a busy man. I mean, you don't wear flannel shirts that well by sitting in the office all the time.
I don't know what that's. Yeah, but thank you for that. Yeah, I like to be a man of the people. I like to be hands-on. So.
But yeah, when you get a chance, because Ben's going to be traveling around and doing because you guys, there's a few shows you guys are going to be, so you're going to be a busy man again the rest of the year. So take the chance if you can to talk to him and pick his brain. He will help you as much as he can with them. Excellent. Ben, again, thank you very much. We'll catch you guys next time. Up next, DJNTV.com/chill, the Tuesday Night Music Show. Brian and Jay and the crew are going to be in there talking music. So again, DJNTV.com/chill. That link will be in the description or the comments of this video, and you can click that in just a little bit and join them in about 10 minutes now. So we'll catch you guys next time. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, John. Bye.